Hello and welcome back to this Damnful Idealistic Crusade. This video will be a review and detailing of the beautiful new release from Eureka, the limited edition set Karloff at Columbia, which are the 6 films Karloff made on some deals while at Columbia, particularly featuring the 4 films that are generally regarded as the Mad Doctor series, a series of B programmers that really in a number of ways sort of stereotyped Karloff as playing the character of the mad scientist or misguided scientist who becomes the Mad Doctor, and then chaos ensues from there. So of course that replaced his earlier typecasting as monsters and creatures and such, coming after his iconic roles at Universal in their horror cycle. But this is a really welcome release and, catnip for classic horror fans and Karloff fans, because these films have, for a long time, been overlooked in favor of more famous or more easily enjoyable films, or films like the Lugosi films for Monogram and things like that, that are entertaining simply for their cheap factor, or entertaining as a cheaper film and a crummier film. But these are all really well made B programmers, and really surprising that they're as good as they are, because they are all B films. But I will detail and break down this set, and then basically what this is, it's an upgrade for what we got on DVD. And while it is seemingly pretty much the same HD preservation masters that Sony made that we got on DVD, the quality uptick is really impressive. Again, even though it's the same master, I was really surprised at how well these looked and sounded on Blu-ray compared to the DVDs. And of course, you're getting the usual fantastic Eureka presentation with maxed out bit rates. The films are spread across 2 discs, but again, these are all B films that practically all of them run just barely over an hour. The longest ones are about an hour and 14 minutes, but most are about an hour and 4, hour and 6 minutes, because they are indeed B features. I'll show you the rear. Again, this is the limited presentation, so it has the nice slipcase and custom art. And once this sells out, which it probably will pretty soon, they will just go to doing a standard version. It's not a box set per se, so I always wind up calling it a special edition box set. But basically, they'll drop the slipcase and probably make the slip art the actual jacket art. And you'll probably lose the nice booklet as well. Try and get the glare off. This is a wonderful companion piece to their excellent Poe films, starring Bela Lugosi, also some starring Karloff. That limited edition release, which I reviewed on this channel already, this is pretty much the companion piece to that, even though it's Karloff and it's at Columbia instead of Universal. Then the interior, I did save the hype sticker. As usual, the booklet is full of great stills. Nice candid still on the back, and it is a really nice substantial booklet with several essays on all of the films in the set. As you can see, there is an entire piece about the Mad Doctor films, and then there are articles on the Black Room as well. And what I always enjoy most about the Eureka Masters of Cinema booklets, they include the viewing notes page, which is also, making sure to remind you to turn off motion smoothing and showing you what the correct image should look like, so you're not looking at a stretched, cropped, or distorted image. And then you get the credits. And again, just packed with nice imagery, nice glossy paper. So these booklets are really nicely done always. Then another nice feature, let me pop the discs out really quick because there's a pretty nice overlay underneath. It looks like this is a still from The Man with 9 Lives. It's a nice production still. I'm trying to figure out how I can... There. It's tinted just like the images on the outside of the case, but it's nice that they did that. And then the discs themselves have a similar matching theme. See if I can get to focus on the label. And again, it is 3 films per disc, which again is perfectly fine because all these films are just barely over an hour. And on DVD, they were single layer and combined in box sets and such. But you don't run into the problem that you did on the budget Mill Creek reissue that crammed all the films onto just, I think it was 2 discs, but it may have been all the way crammed down onto just 1. And again, it's nice that they chose shots of Karloff as the various characters he plays in the films, because what's interesting is that all the performances that Karloff gives, and even the wardrobe and the costuming and the hairstyling and the makeup, it's all varied and sometimes within individual films. So he's usually playing not just one character, but variations on the same character. And even in these Mad Doctor films, it's really interesting to see the variations that he does within films, and then playing 4 different Mad Doctors in 4 different films, and they all feel like completely different characters, even though it's like, well, how could somebody in the span of a very short time play 4 mad scientists that are completely different? There would be some similarities, and there aren't. It's really incredible. So to go over the extras and what you'll get in this release, so all 6 films are in 1080p HD with lossless mono audio. They are all, again, upgrades from the same preservation masters that were on DVD. The extras are really nicely done. Again, since these were all short programmers, you would think that most people aren't going to go to the trouble of making substantial extras, especially not for every film. But Eureka actually went the extra mile and created an entire extra package for each film. So each film has an excellent commentary and a stills gallery, a photo gallery, which also includes production materials and presentation materials, posters, lobby cards, and such. But the big draw are the audio commentaries for each film. And what's really nice is that they got some of the great horror historians that do a lot of tracks. So for 3 films, you get a commentary track from Kevin Lyons and Jonathan Rigby, who of course is a great horror historian, and you've heard probably on many Hammer Films documentaries and commentary tracks. And then the other 3, you get the also excellent pairing of Stephen Jones and Kim Newman, who are no strangers to doing great commentary tracks on classic horror releases. So I was going to buy this set no matter what, and I was so excited when they announced it. But when I saw that all 6 films were getting commentaries from great horror historians, I was like, okay, that doubles my interest there. Again, each film does also include a really nice photo and stills gallery section, and they're all in the menu. So when you actually select the film, you will be able to view the individual extras for each film, which I thought was a really nice touch. And then they rounded out with 4 radio dramas that Karloff did in the 1950s. They're all seemingly episodes of the Inner Sanctum mystery series, the iconic long-running series that eventually had a film adaptation series. But it's just more examples of Karloff really getting into some nice meaty roles, and they actually seem like they've been cleaned up a little bit. So I was surprised. Usually the radio shows are just sort of a token extra, but they have a nice still for each, and you just view it that way, and their losses as well, and they sound excellent. So I was expecting a crackly presentation like most surviving radio shows are, but they seem to be preserved really well, and they were really nice half-hour episodes of the Inner Sanctum. And again, Karloff was such a fantastic actor and had such an iconic voice that hearing him do a radio show or a live reading or something is equally impactful. So they were a really nice listen. So I would encourage people who pick up this set, don't just skip over those or glance at them. They're really worthwhile listens. Now let's talk about each of the 6 films very briefly to give you a sort of overview. So the first film is 1935's The Black Room, which really needs no introduction for Karloff fans. It's generally regarded, and I think rightfully so, as one of Karloff's best film performances, because he gets to have the actor's delight of playing a pair of twins who are completely different from one another. But the real fun of the picture is he's actually playing 3 roles, because of course you have the benevolent twin complete with a paralyzed arm that he can't move, so he carries like this. And then you have the evil wicked twin, and then you have the third role when the wicked twin assumes the identity of the benevolent twin with the paralyzed arm. And then the fun and the suspense comes from how long can he keep the charade up. So he's actually playing 3 roles, and they're all fully distinct from one another, and it's a beautifully realized gothic drama, really, for being a B picture. It was directed by Roy William Neill, who later went on to direct Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman. He had a very long and varied career, and this was in the same year, 1935, that, of course, Karloff did the incredible performance in Bride of Frankenstein. And I think time-wise, he had just come off doing The Raven, which really was more of Lugosi's vehicle, but was, completely wicked and dark, and really the film responsible for the British horror ban that really killed off the golden age of classic film horror. But The Black Room, while they tried to sell it as a horror film, again, it's really much more of a gothic drama. The real problem with it is, of course, it's a B film and it's a programmer, so it's a very short runtime, and eventually events get a bit streamlined and things are very compressed to get down to, again, a B runtime. But really, it's an extraordinarily satisfying film. It's a truly great film with one of Karloff's best performances he ever gave, and you just hang on every close-up and every word. And of course, because he's playing twins, there has to be a lot of trick photography, and this being in the pre-digital age and also a B film, it's not like they were able to spend a lot of time and money. And it's really incredible how well they pulled off the dual exposure photography. So there are a number of shots where both versions of Karloff's characters are on screen at the same time, and you don't really see the seam lines. There are some shots, obviously, with doubles and over-the-shoulder shots, but it's really well mounted and extremely well done. So you don't even think about the artifice of it obviously being stand-ins and such. It's a beautifully put together film. It's hitting far above its level as a B programmer. And Karloff was excited because he was getting to finally play a role where he didn't have to wear a ton of makeup, and people would actually see his face and he would actually get to act. And again, it's sort of an actor's delight to be able to play a role or a doppelganger, but of course it's a pair of twins. But for me, I think the most interesting part is it's actually a three character role, because you have the evil twin having to assume the identity of the benevolent twin, and it builds up to a nice climax, and of course it's over very, very quickly. But again, there's some really great photography in it. It feels like an A picture. It's really aspiring for that. Every time I watch it, I often wish I'd been able to see like the full length version of it, because it's so well done that it would be nice to see it at like 90 minutes with a little more breathing room and developed as an A feature. It's probably definitely the best film of the six, but I do really love the Mad Doctor films. I really enjoy all the films in this set, but The Black Room really is the standout that most horror fans were probably aware of, or Karloff fans are aware of, and it's going to be the film that you read about the most and hear about the most going in. But it's really essential, and it's not really a horror film. Again, it's really like a gothic costume drama. You get the full gothic flavor, and it's really incredible because it's a B film at Columbia, which was not, even at that time, known for being a prestigious studio. This was just after It Happened One Night, which was the film that swept the top 5 Oscars and really elevated Columbia to being something that wasn't, just at the top of Poverty Row in terms of being a major studio. So this is Columbia finally getting elevated, and right after It Happened One Night, but it's still their B picture division. And again, it's a really fantastic picture that really is hitting tens at all levels. So it is going far and above being a simple B programmer, and Karloff is absolutely magnificent. So then we jump ahead a few years, and we get to the point at which Karloff decided to come back to Columbia. They made a nice deal for him, and this is what began the series of the Mad Doctor films. So some people loop in the comedy that's included with this set with the Mad Doctor films and say there were 5, but I try to look at it as just the 4 Mad Doctor films. And of course, when I say Mad Doctor, that's kind of a misnomer, because the scientist characters really are misguided and they are not understood by those around them. So they don't really quite become mad until halfway through, and they're not always fully mad either. It's really interesting when you look at these characterizations. It's not a stereotypical mad doctor out to destroy the world or something. They always have motivations and reasons for what they do. But anyway. So the first film of which is The Man They Could Not Hang, which is actually a very interesting picture. Again, it's a B film, as all of these are, so unfortunately there is a little bit of compressed time, and you wish they had a little more breathing space. But all four of these had mostly the same production team. Some of the same actors outside of Karloff did return in various roles, and the first three of them were directed by the same director, Nick Grind, who was a very experienced B film director and does a really nice job with these. But in particular, Man They Could Not Hang has an interesting setup, and what's also interesting, at least the first two films of this series, the science you see does have a basis in fact, and it was science that was on the right track of things that would develop. This film is dealing with trying to develop essentially an artificial heart to keep people in a comatose state longer, so it would be safer and possible to do actual surgeries that like what would eventually develop as the open heart surgery. And of course, this was sort of being based around the idea of the Lindbergh heart that was in the news at the time. But of course, when you see the practice in the film, and of course it's a B film, it looks really silly. Just this mechanical glass and steel heart they come up with. But again, the ideas are actually sound. The whole setup is to have Karloff scientist character somehow get wronged or thrown in prison or arrested or executed or something, somehow wronged by society who does not understand what he's trying to do, and then he decides to continue with his goals, and in this film exact his revenge. And so basically, about halfway through, the whole tone of the film changes and it becomes a different story. And really, in a lot of ways, every time I see it, I'm struck at how much it resembles revenge films, and especially it really does have a Dr. Phibes vibe. So I don't know if anyone really knows this film outside of horror fans, or especially back then, but the whole notion of getting together the jurors who convicted him and escaping the gallows with the assistance of his helper by using his own invention to bring himself back to life, and then basically being consumed with his rage and desire for revenge, and then appearing as a man everyone thinks is dead, and then coming up with various ways to get rid of the actual people who have wronged him. There's actually a particular death that seems bit for bit copied in the second Phibes film, Dr. Phibes Rises Again, a particular death that involves a telephone. And that one always clinches it for me. It seems like this is like a progenitor for the Dr. Phibes type of film, where the great lead character is getting revenge for against a certain group of people that have wronged him in some way. Again, unfortunately, it's a B film, so you get that for about 15, 20 minutes, and then all of a sudden it's a sort of race to the finish. But it's done really well. It's put together really well, and Karloff's performance is excellent, and he creates this whole character, and he doesn't wear a ton of makeup and things. But again, it's interesting to see each of these scientist characters are different from one another, and they each have a complete arc and a journey. And Karloff really even creates a physical sense of these characters. He walks differently as each one, and he moves differently, and even his vocal inflection changes. And of course, in this film, his character is actually hung for his supposed crimes and then brought back to life. So of course, when he comes back to life, he's much stiffer, and of course his neck was broken and repaired, so he holds his neck in a particular fashion, and he speaks differently. But of course, Karloff is the main draw of all these films. So while there are some great character actors in other roles, everything else is kind of secondary to the lead showy Karloff performance. And you can see him really stretching out and enjoying not having to act under 16 layers of makeup. And even though these were B films, they were built around his name and his image. He's really investing himself here, and some people and historians have made the claim that later on you can see the Karloff films where he's just going through the motions and the picture isn't very good and it was for the paycheck, and you can tell that difference from the films where he was fully invested, and it became a real acting challenge for him, particularly films like the three films he made with Val Lewton, most of all The Body Snatcher, which is another one of his great roles of all of his entire career. But I would make the argument that you also get that in the Mad Doctor films, because again, each character is different from each other and goes through a complete arc. And again, the whole film is built around Karloff and his character. So if the lead actor wasn't giving it his all, giving it 200%, the picture wouldn't work. And again, these are very short films, so they never outstay their welcome. In fact, the best of them always leave you wanting more. So the Man They Could Not Hang was a success, and they immediately went into the second of the Mad Doctor cycle, which is The Man with Nine Lives, and is definitely my personal favorite of the four. This one, instead of dealing with an artificial heart pump and such, deals with essentially the birth of cryogenics. And it doesn't, that term really isn't used in the film, but that's what Karloff's character is really trying to do. And again, because it's a B film in 1940, you know, it's very cheesy and laughable at how they show this in a hospital type setting. And you literally have a person lying on a slab and they're covering them with buckets of ice, and then they revive them and pour hot coffee down their throat. So while some of that stuff and the trappings can be very cheesy and silly and endearing in that sort of way, the actual science is there, and you could recognize, okay, this is talking about, you know, cryogenics long before that was a really recognized and available scientific idea. But the actual story construction, I think, is fascinating because it's also probably the longest of the films because it builds up to Karloff's reveal. So you basically have about 14 or 15 minutes, almost a whole reel building up to Karloff's reveal. But you have this scientist character who is following the research notes of this scientist who has disappeared, who was basically the foremost authority in the field of cryogenics and trying to develop a cure for cancer. So again, material that you don't expect to be the subject of a B film. So it definitely has high ideals. But basically, he and his nurse, and of course there always has to be a female love interest of sorts in these films, even though they're B programmers, they travel to the last known residence of the scientists, and of course it's a dilapidated old house, and then eventually they stumble on and fall into the laboratory area deep underground, and they find the frozen vault where, of course, Karloff is the scientist, and he's been frozen away for 10 years. And then they find further the people who were against him and thwarted his efforts 10 years before, who also got frozen in the process. And so for 10 years, all these characters have been presumed dead, and they are revived. And so it's this interesting idea that becomes a sort of locked room drama because they're all in this underground vault of sorts, and the notion of it having been 10 years and all these people being frozen and having to come to terms with that, and some don't do very well, and then eventually the perfected formula that kept them alive is lost, and Karloff's scientist becomes adamant that no one will leave until he recreates the formula, and he has a number of perfect human guinea pigs to test out his various theories. So there is some antagonism, and Karloff again is playing a scientist who isn't necessarily mad, but becomes so blinded in his noble pursuits and being thwarted by society at large that no cost is too great. That's what these characters are about, and so they're not necessarily mad scientists. And there are great moments in this film where Karloff's character literally stops what he's doing and acknowledges the purported evil of his actions, but he holds it up to his noble quest, and he must find the answer, and he won't rest until he does. And, you know, what does it matter if a few people have to die to save millions? So there are a lot of high ideas going on in this film in particular, which is probably why it's my favorite of the four Mad Doctor films. It's a really surprising picture. Again, far better than what you would think for a B programmer, and particularly the main set, the underground ice cavern secret lab that's built into the bottom of a glacier underneath this old house on the Canadian border. It's a really interesting setting and a really nicely done set. It's very atmospheric, and again, very impressive for a B film. And then the actual frozen chamber part, it looks like they may have actually gone in and done some shooting in some sort of ice house as well. So it's a very impressive film, and especially because you get that nice buildup on the front end, and it builds to a satisfying conclusion, just like Man, They Could Not Hang. So again, it's probably my favorite of the four. And it also was successful enough to go into a third film, which is Before I Hang, also directed by Nick Grind. Also, again, you have Karloff as a scientist character, and the interesting bit here is the film opens with him on trial for essentially having committed a mercy killing. So, again, getting into moral ideas and things that just did not appear in B films. And eventually he's convicted and sentenced to death, essentially for, again, mercifully eliminating a patient of his who had no option and was an unbearable pain. And again, Karloff is playing a very different character. He's a very elderly scientist here, complete with the white hair and the glasses and such, and he moves in a particular way to suggest a much older man. But the gag is what he's working on is a serum that essentially, cures various ills and actually acts against the aging process. So again, interesting science, but this is the film that sort of gets into a little bit more science fiction, and essentially he's in prison and is allowed to operate and keep working in a laboratory they build for him until his death date approaches. And then as he's being let off, he decides to inject the experimental serum into himself, and as soon as he does that, they commute his sentence to life imprisonment, and he's like, oh no. But then, interestingly, he goes through a period of delirium tremens and such, and then awakens and is visibly younger. His hair is a bit darker. They don't go for a whole thing where they physically show you a bunch of stuff, and it's much more effective that way because he basically wakes up and you get the very quickly. It's obvious that this serum has had some sort of effect, and he has achieved some sort of scientific breakthrough. But the downside is apparently because they used the blood of a confirmed homicidal maniac in part of their research process, it gives Karloff's scientist character homicidal tendencies. And yes, that's as cheesy and silly as it sounds, which is probably why it's my least favorite of the four films. It's still well done. It's still nicely put together and actually very well shot, just like all of them. But the whole gag of Karloff then wanting to commit murder simply because he has these impulses from a murderer's blood, it's a little bit silly. But again, it's such a short film and the lead performance is so great. And what's really striking is it builds to a scene where eventually Karloff somehow has his sentence commuted and then is furthering his research. And there's this great dialogue scene where he goes to three of his great friends who are doctors and a great pianist, and they're all as old as he once was. And he tries to convince them to take this experimental serum as well to preserve their talents for generations. And they all refuse him, but it's a really nicely played scene with a lot of high ideas and interest. It becomes a morality play. But then eventually one of them decides and is convinced by Karloff's character to perhaps go along with this, but then the murderous impulses come on. And what's great about the murderous impulses is there are no words spoken. It's all done via performance silently, and you'll see Karloff do these really majestic sequences where he suggests everything very slowly, very deliberately. And he has this particular tic that develops where he reaches one hand up and basically grabs the side of his neck. And you can see the changes go through his eyes and his face. So all of this is completely done via performance without any words. And that's really what you want to watch this picture for, is the lead performance. So again, while I think it's the weakest of the four Mad Doctor films, I really think that Karloff's performance shines through and is brilliant. And there are some really nice scenes in the film. And again, it's very short. It's a B film, just barely over an hour. So you do have to excuse it for having to compress down time. And it manages to have some really great ideas, even though some of it is definitely a little bit on the hokey side. And then the last of the Mad Doctor films is 1941's The Devil Commands, which was directed by Edward Dmytryk, which was basically made when he was on his way up and when he would eventually graduate to A features. But on this film, you can see him really aspiring and doing a lot of the stuff he would do in some of his famous film noirs. So The Devil Commands definitely is the film of the four that has the most film noir vibes. It also has some feeling of Rebecca, particularly in the opening, because they use a very spooky old house on a cliff, and there's a woman giving a voiceover introduction, so it feels very much Rebecca inspired there. And but the actual film, it feels very noir inspired. And again, Karloff is a character, a scientist after a noble cause, but this time he's basically trying to reach the other realm and be able to not just communicate telepathically via machine with other people, but perhaps somehow communicate with those who have passed on to another realm. In other words, speak with the dead. And of course, after the opening setup, as is very much indicated and telegraphed, Karloff's beloved wife in the film is killed in a tragic accident, and that essentially shatters him and leads him to be consumed by his research. And then the noir touch comes in, where he encounters a false mystic who is a very controlling, domineering woman who sees the monetary possibilities of the Karloff scientist character's process, and basically commandeers him, and they go off to this spooky old mansion essentially for a few years, and the experiments go and grow further and further down the rabbit hole they go. And it's interesting to see Karloff's scientist character not only go through a physical change through his grief, and you see his hair whiten, but he becomes completely lost in his experiments and basically loses touch with the outside world and becomes very remote and very distant. And it's a really well-made film. It's extremely atmospheric. Again, it's one of those films that you see and you wish wasn't a B film. You wish it had a bit more. And there is some discussion that maybe there were some trims made and that there are some scenes that are missing that were perhaps shot. So maybe originally this film ran an extra 10 or 15 minutes, but that hasn't ever been confirmed. They do talk about it in the commentary. But even with that, it's a strikingly well-made film. Definitely is perhaps the artiest, if you want to use that term, of the four Mad Doctor films. But it's a real surprise, and every time I come back and rewatch it, and so it makes a nice capstone to the four Mad Doctor films, even though it is the most different stylistically and thematically. And it is, again, getting more into the realm of science fiction than actual science. And then the last film is actually a spoof comedy. It's called The Boogeyman Will Get You. And even though it's usually claiming that, most people claim or make the statement, oh, it's making fun of the Mad Doctor films that Karloff made for Columbia, really it's more inspired by his great success in the stage play of Arsenic and Old Lace, and also the play George Washington Also Slept Here. So it's basically imagine Arsenic and Old Lace, but you have a mad scientist character played by Karloff and a bunch of eccentrics, and it's also trying to be a screwball comedy and other things. Unfortunately, it doesn't really work. It's got some nice little moments, and you have Karloff playing against Peter Lorre, who, and of course, seeing them together is just magic in and of itself. But unfortunately, both of them really come away wasted because the story just really isn't up to snuff. There are some nice moments, and it's chock-filled with great character actors, and it's charming enough, but it really doesn't stay with you. It doesn't really have any lasting power, and you can clearly see how they were trying to cook up something that's referenced and sort of felt like Arsenic and Old Lace, and that way they could use Karloff, but it doesn't really hold a candle to any of the other films in this set. And again, it's most disappointing because you have Karloff and Lorre, and they're just kind of there, and it's pretty much wasted. The best bits in the film are where it seems like they're just inventing things to do. Karloff is wonderful, and Lorre steals every scene he's in. My particular favorite moments are Lorre's character is the local magistrate, and they go to his house. He's got 15 different signs because he basically does everything. He's the doctor, he's the sheriff, he does the marriages, he does the insurance, he does everything. But he's dressed, he looks like he's got the same costume that Robert Mitchum's character would eventually wear in The Night of the Hunter. So he's dressed in all black, and he's got the vest and the pocket watch and the big black hat. But my favorite gag is, for some reason, he carries around a kitten, and he takes it in and out of his pocket, and he'll be like, "No, you need to be quiet, not now, later," and he'll just put it back in his coat pocket. It's a bizarre touch. It's my favorite thing in the film. It's never explained, but it at least gives it some life and some vitality. But again, it's a very short B film. It doesn't overstay its welcome because, again, it's very short. But unfortunately, it's a very mixed bag. So that's why I hesitate to include it. Everybody always says, "Oh, it's the fifth of the Mad Doctor films Karloff made." I'm like, well, no, not really. It's made by different people. It's, like made a year later almost, and it's really riffing on his stage success in Arsenic and Old Lace. It's trying to be a screwball comedy is what it is. Now, again, I have to mention how great the audio commentaries are. I really enjoy anytime the great team, if you will, of horror historians come on for commentary tracks for classic horror releases, and particularly for these films because they're so overlooked, and also because they're not always exactly horror films, and they were made at Columbia, not Universal, and it's Karloff, and there's Lugosi isn't any of them, so they basically sort of have always been outliers. And so when I first saw them and came across them, I became fascinated by them because they're really well done. Again, with Boogeyman Will Get You is sort of just like the extra tacked on feature you're getting as a bonus. I'm primarily talking about The Black Room and the 4 Mad Doctor films. But again, at least you get an extra feature basically. But anyway, they also have not had a lot of video releases, so I came across them first on DVD, where I finally got to see them. And weirdly, Sony did a box set of 4 of these films by itself. So we had the Icons of Horror Karloff collection, which gives you The Black Room, and then Man They Could Not Hang, Before I Hang, and then Boogeyman Will Get You. And I don't know why they did this, and then they released The Man with 9 Lives and The Devil Commands as separate DVDs. I've never gotten the Devil Commands standalone DVD. It's been on my wish list, and then they announced this. I've rented it before, so I've seen it, but I just had never gotten a physical copy before this set came out. But anyway, I don't know why they didn't just package the Mad Doctor films together, and I also don't know why they didn't just go ahead and put the other 2 films and make it one box of Karloff titles. But anyway, these were nice for the time, and they made preservation masters. Unfortunately, these films were not very well preserved, and so some of them you do see they have replaced titles. So while some of them will say, a Columbia release, some of them have a reissue company credit on there, and some of them have actual redone credits. So that also means that unfortunately the actual print quality is not always the greatest. They did do their best, but there is some damage. There are some errors, and you will see some defects pop up, but nothing too crazy or terrible. The one thing you will notice the most is, unfortunately, The Man with 9 Lives, and it's the same on the DVD. Apparently, they had to use it looks like maybe a 16 millimeter source, primarily for like the last 10 to 15 minutes of the film or towards the end. So you will notice when you're watching this film that when you get towards the end, the quality takes a big dip. But again, that is seemingly the best surviving materials that they had to, splice in there and make a preservation master, because it wasn't in the 35 millimeter material. But outside of that, it's understandable why this stuff happened. But what you're getting is the same preservation masters that we had on DVD on this Blu-ray release, but they have been very nicely spruced up. And again, I expected, since these weren't new scans, I expected basically an HD version of what we got on DVD. But I have to say, I am very pleasantly surprised at the quality increase. Everything is better across the board, from fine detail to black level, shadow detail. it's just remarkable. And it also seems like they did a little bit of audio restoration work as well, because I did notice that some of the tracks maybe sounded a little bit cleaner, and that they also did maybe some hiss reduction. So that was unexpected as well. So I'm very pleased to have this release finally. I never thought these titles would ever hit Blu-ray, so it was a surprise even for the announcement, let alone it was coming from Eureka. It was a whole box set limited edition package, and with commentaries on all 6 films. And also, I gotta say, the stills galleries are nicely done. So it's not the usual just a handful of stills and they call it a stills gallery. No, they are nicely put together packages, and also include posters, foreign posters, and lobby cards as well, which I really appreciated. So this is a fantastic package. It makes a nice companion to their 3 Poe Tales from Universal starring Lugosi set that they did last year. I think it's an essential release for horror fans and Karloff fans. I know most people aren't going to be aware of these films, and advertising and promoting a set of B films from the 30s and 40s, I know is not going to be, what most people are going to gravitate towards. But these are really well made. I would recommend them to anybody. I've shown these films to a number of people, and every time I show these to people, I always get positive receptions. I'm always very pleased because they are really well made. Again, The Black Room is really the standout film of the set, but I really like the Mad Doctor films. I love the Man They Could Not Hang. But again, I adore Man with 9 Lives. I think that's another great film. So it's got fantastic stuff in it, and phenomenal Karloff performances. Again, The Black Room is one of his truly great screen performances. So if you're a Karloff fan and you haven't gotten this yet, it's a must. It's got this beautiful package, and definitely go ahead and get it if you're interested in it before they sell out of this limited version, because you'll lose the slipcase and all the nice goodies and such. And again, it's a really nice, striking, colorful image on the package as well. So, and it makes a great upgrade for the DVD, so I will be passing these on. The other thing was you can get the films on DVD for very cheaply, all in one package, but it is a Mill Creek package where they cram everything onto as few discs as possible. So if you want to go the absolute cheapest route, they are available that way, but I wouldn't recommend doing that because, again, there are some compression issues. Now, in terms of ordering this, of course, it is Eureka, which is a British distributor and label. So I purchased this directly from their website, which has free shipping, and I've never actually ordered for them before. I almost have several times, but since COVID happened and that sort of wiped out ordering discs from Amazon UK and other retailers, I decided to finally go for it because I was just dying to see what this looked like. And so they ship to the US for free. It's very easy and painless if you haven't ordered directly from them before. It is a little bit on the pricey side, but honestly, not that terrible since you get audio commentaries for each film, a nice extras package, and it still comes out cheaper than for example, the Shout Factory releases of the Universal horror films, the Universal horror collections, which they've done. I think they've done 6 volumes now, and I always want to get those, but they're usually between $50 and $65 retail, and they almost never go on sale. Whereas this gives you 6 films instead of 4, and still will only run you, once you do the currency conversion, about $40. So it's not terrible, and honestly, I think it's worth it for the supplemental package, the disc encoding and everything. I should also mention, since we're on encoding and such, some people have noticed a problem with a particular film in this set. It seems to be a player issue. If you're looking at it on an older player, if you're watching Man They Could Not Hang, it will sort of not quite stutter, but it has some slowdown issues where apparently the players aren't able to track the disc very well. I didn't have any issues at all, and other people haven't had any issues, but there's a thread on the Blu-ray forums where it seems like everybody who's reporting that issue, it seems like a player firmware issue. So do keep that in mind, and if you do have that problem, Eureka has already set up an email, so they're trying to figure out. I don't know if they're doing a replacement program, but I know they have said if you do have issues, you can send back the particular disc, and they will send you a replacement. So I thought that was a very nice, and they were actually very fast about it, so it was a very quick turnaround. So that's the only thing surrounding this release that I want to highlight. So if you do get this and you do have that problem, definitely make sure you try it on a newer player as well to see if it's also there. But you can email Eureka directly. And there is no US equivalent for this. This is a UK exclusive. So currently in the States, we're still stuck with the old DVDs, and I don't think anybody else is going to tackle this. This is a very niche thing. And again, I'm just shocked these films are on Blu-ray. I can't believe it. And again, it's a really nice improvement, even though it is the same preservation masters that were on DVD. So when you put the DVD of the Black Room on and then you switch over to the Blu-ray, it's a night and day difference. It really is. Plus, you're getting the benefit of a well-encoded disc with lossless audio. So I can't recommend these highly enough. I think it's essential for classic horror fans or fans of Boris Karloff or really fans of classic Hollywood. Again, these films, for the most part, again, I do have some issues with two of them, but if you watch one, you want to watch all of them. They all make a nice package together, which is why all 6 are included here. So this is the Karloff at Columbia release from the Eureka label. This is the limited edition, which will probably sell out very quickly, so definitely purchase it sooner rather than later if you don't want to have to be stuck with the standard edition version. And again, this will go into my regular yearly rotation every October. I watch these films regularly, but now with this beautiful new release, it just entices me to watch them all the more. And there are some real gems in here. So with that, thank you so very much for watching. Definitely leave comments below if you've picked up this set or you're interested in getting this release from Eureka, or if you're a fan of these Karloff at Columbia films, which, again, I think there's some absolute gems in here. So thanks ever so much for watching, and keep physical media alive and keep your discs spinning.